Posted originally on the archive of our own at http://download.archivia4own.org/works/5978767. Rating: explicit archive warning. No archive warnings apply. Category: FM fandom. Miraculous Ladybug relationship. Adrian Agreste, Marinette Dupain Cheng, Chad Noir. Marinette Dupain Cheng, Adrian Agreste, Ladybug, Chad Noir, Ladybug. Aaliyah Césaire, Nino Lahif, Chloe Bourgeois, Nathaniel Kurtzberg character, Adrian Agreste, Marinette Dupain Cheng, Aaliyah Césaire, Nino Lahif, Chloe Bourgeois, Nathaniel Kurtzberg. Additional tags: romance, bondage, switching, pegging, orgasm control, like the dorkiest sex in the universe, leather kink, nylon kink, costume kink, casual kink discussion, sexual exploration, sex toys, oral sex, vaginal sex, anal sex, mirror sex, aftercare, alternate universe, no supernatural, spanking, impact play, orgasm delay, slow romance, friends with benefits, who want to be lovers but they're idiots, guided masturbation, private exhibitionism, BDSM scene negotiation, dorky sex, really dorky sex, gratuitous references to the Hamilton musical, gratuitous use of cafe exposition scenes, misrepresentation of French business law, sub. Adrian, sub. Marinette Dom. Adrian, Dome. Marinette, everybody gets topped, teaching, dream sex, forced orgasm, phone sex, porn with plot, lots of plot, fake, pretend relationship series, part 1 of Sin 2026 collections, Ladybug stats, published 2016-02-11 updated 2017-07-02 chapters, 24. Words, 198,137 Satisfaction brought it back by Sidereal. Sandman summary: most people rekindled friendships with people from high school over Facebook or Twitter. Most people met for coffee, shared pictures of their bratty children, and sent old friends Christmas letters once a year. Marinette was clearly not most people, as she had somehow hooked up with her former high school crush on a bondage dating website and didn't know it until he was standing in front of her with an identical look of bemused embarrassment plastered all over his pretty face. Notes: disclaimer, this is an adult piece of fiction about adult characters doing adult things. All sexual acts in this story take place between characters above the age of consent, and everything will be tagged appropriately. That said, this story is explicit and contains explicit depictions of BDSM that are integral to the story. Reader discretion is advised. Disclaimer: to disclaim harder, this is a work of smutty fanfiction and should not be construed as anything other than smutty fanfiction. This is not a how-to guide on BDSM, bondage, or online relationships. The author doesn't claim to be an expert on anything kink-related and urges interested parties to be smart, be safe, and do their own independent research on the topic. Enjoy. Sinners. See the end of the work for more notes. What got dragged in chapter notes? See the end of the chapter for notes. Every time the bell over the door chimed, Marinette glanced up from the magazine she was only half reading to study the people who walked into the small cafe. Her eyes flitted over the faces of the women who bustled in, passing over them without a second glance as she tried not to look like she was openly staring at the men who walked by. From her corner table, she could see almost everyone who came and went, and paid special attention to anyone who looked like they were looking for a woman in polka-dotted earrings or anyone with a black cat pin affixed to their lapel. She was still early, having arrived nearly an hour before the time they were supposed to meet to scope out a secluded table where the odds of running into someone she knew were slim. Now all she had to do was play the waiting game and hope the man she was planning on meeting wasn't a 50-year-old troll in a fedora. Marinette's phone buzzed on the table and she glanced down to see Aaliyah's portrait blink up at her as she unlocked the screen. Aaliyah, you okay? Marinette, yeah, I'm fine. Marinette, he hasn't shown up yet, so I'm just killing time. Aaliyah, K, just checking. Aaliyah, give me a shout if you need a rescue. Aaliyah, do you have my taser? Marinette, thanks, but I left it at home. Marinette, I don't think I'll need it. Aaliyah, yeah, he'd probably just get off on it if you started shocking him, wouldn't he? Marinette, I'm going to regret telling you about this, aren't I? Aaliyah, 3 Aaliyah, just give me a signal if you decide to hook up with him. Marinette, oh my god. Aaliyah, like the ladybug is in the spider web or something. Marinette, it's just coffee. I'm not going to jump into bed with the guy on the first date. What kind of girl do you think I am? Aaliyah, well Marinette, don't answer that. Pressing her second iced coffee to her face in an effort to take some of the color out of it, Marinette let out a long sigh. The fact that Aaliyah knew about her little rendezvous was a necessary evil and worth whatever ribbing Marinette was bound to get. She may have known her acquaintance for the past couple of months via text, but this would be the first time she actually met him in person. The cafe she suggested they meet at was about 2 blocks from the magazine Aaliyah worked for, so if things went sour, she would have somewhere to go in a hurry. And however much Aaliyah might tease her, it was Marinette's best friend's prompting that had gotten her out onto the dating scene to begin with. Granted, Marinette had gone in a completely different direction than Aaliyah had intended when she broached the topic a few months ago, but Marinette refused to be overly embarrassed. She had busted her hide for years in college without so much as a third date, and at 25 years old, she would hope she was old enough to know what she wanted in a relationship, long-term or otherwise. Glancing around surreptitiously, Marinette opened the browser on her phone and flipped through her bookmarks until Sal de Velour's soft blue background slowly filled the screen. It had taken a few weeks of casually searching through dating websites, weeding out the sketchier ones off the bat before she landed on Sal de Velour's. The fact that it was the only site that required an application immediately appealed to her. She figured that would weed out a slew of weirdos, even if they were only the lazy ones, as well as the fact that it was more forum than dating site. Of course, it had a personal section where people looking for more immediate gratification could hook up, but one look at some of the more vulgar ads caused Marinette to abandon that section of the site for the general forums, where everything from politics to sports to fashion was discussed by the site's members. The only topic that seemed to be taboo in the general forums was the rather taboo subject that brought them all together in the first place. And it was there that she first met the user she only knew as Chat Noir. It began, oddly enough, with a short essay on the importance of lingerie. Marinette had only been on the site for a few weeks, but Miss_Ladybug had already made her presence known in the relatively small fashion corner of the website. Most threads were typical of the rest of the website, which meant that they were out of Marinette's wheelhouse. How to clean leather, good latex tailors near Marseille. How much is too much chrome studding? But every once in a while, Marinette stumbled on a thread that was more up her alley. One Friday night, when she had nothing better to do, she wandered into a thread on the Victoria's Secret fashion show, and amid a sea of who was the hottest comments, there seemed to be a post calling into question the practicality and comfort of some of the more intricate pieces. As though the 6-foot wings jutting from the models' backs wasn't a tip-off that fashion shows weren't exactly meant to showcase the most practical of outfits. As if people who routinely wore leather corsets and literal spiked heels had any room to talk about practicality. She was ready to go into a very long, very detailed history of the Victoria's Secret show and its impact on mainstream fashion journalism, mostly because she had a hell of a day where she literally sewed her shirt into a dress she had to deliver by Tuesday and felt like yelling at someone, even if it was just online. But when she refreshed the page, she saw that someone had beaten her to the punch in a rather spectacular fashion. In less than 5 sentences, someone had outlined the attention Victoria's Secret drew to the fashion industry and explained the concept of haute couture and art fashion without sounding overly condescending or snobbish. Marinette's eyes glanced over his reply briskly before canning the 2.5-page response she had queued up and was ready to fire. She swore the cat icon next to the response winked at her, but that was something that could easily be chalked up to sleep deprivation and caffeine addiction. She didn't know who this person was, only that they were ostensibly male, single, about the same age as her, and that their name that went along with the occasionally winking black cat icon next to every post. His name was Chat Noir. She didn't think much of it then, but the more time she spent idly browsing the forums while watching Project Runway reruns, the more she saw his name crop up in forums ranging from fashion to computer games to auto racing. After a while, she started responding in some of the more benign topics, slowly working up a nice rapport that was, despite the site they were on, completely PG. It was a refreshing change of pace from the usual pickup lines she got, which usually consisted of an exaggerated penis length and a visceral description of what they would like to do to her, with said exaggerated penis followed, almost invariably, by a profanity-laced message when she failed to fall for their suave charms. The fact that she could actually hold a conversation with someone regarding something other than preferred choice of rope, lubricant, position was an enormous plus, because truth be told, Marinette wasn't in a position Chat would have appreciated that pun to speak with any kind of authority on the subject. The truth of the matter was that, while she was hardly inexperienced, sharing a room while going to school, interning for designers in New York didn't leave her a lot of time to explore some of her more persistent fantasies. So they stuck to subjects they knew about: fashion, TV shows, music. It was light and casual at first, but as the weeks turned into months, they found themselves talking about more personal topics on Skype under carefully assumed identities. She may have liked this person, but she wasn't about to give them anything they could use to track her. It was a delicate line they both seemed to walk between a desire to be honest and a practical need to play some cards a little closer to their chests. She learned this Chatenoir had lived abroad for a couple of years, he worked for his family's business, and that he had been interested in fashion since he was a teenager. He was an only child like herself, had strong feelings about supporting the welfare and health of models like herself, and apparently was an aficionado of online cat collecting games. Marinette deduced he must be someone in the fashion industry, probably a photographer or fashion writer, since some of the more technical terms went over his head. Other than that, she could have passed him 20 times in the street and have no earthly clue who he really was. She may have also glanced at his preferences page but got flustered after she had to Google what switch meant. The fact that her own page was completely blank made it feel like she was spying on him, despite the fact that she was just looking at information he deliberately made public. Marinette had made it clear from the beginning that she was testing the waters and that she wasn't looking to necessarily hook up with anyone, a fact that he seemed more than fine with even as their conversation strayed off the forums and onto instant messaging. There were boundaries neither one of them seemed eager to cross, but after they mentioned they both lived in Paris, part of Marinette wanted to meet this person. Other than Aaliyah, she was usually too busy with work to socialize much, and it would be nice to bring her close friend circle up to a whopping 2, though casual friendship was probably not the kind of meetup that Salle de Velours usually made happen. Beggars can't always be choosers. It was her idea to meet at the cafe, her idea to somehow identify themselves with jewelry like some kind of spy movie. It was a guaranteed failsafe in case either of them got cold feet at the last second, since neither of them knew each other's names or what they really looked like. He seemed a little apprehensive at first but warmed up when she suggested they meet at one of the smaller cafes in case he was self-conscious or something. Even though the meeting was on her turf, Marinette was still pleasantly anxious about putting a face to the sea of disembodied text she had been chatting with for 3 months now. And even though she wasn't looking to hook up with someone, she wouldn't complain if the face that went with the text was pretty one. Fighting down a blush, Marinette downed the rest of her coffee in a single gulp. She was getting way ahead of herself. Right now she just wanted to meet a friend who happened to know how to untie 6 knots in under a minute if his profile was to be believed, but a friend nonetheless. Their conversations over Skype under assumed identities had never crossed the friendship line, and that was all Marinette really hoped for, someone she could talk to about her hobbies, as Aaliyah put it, without being teased for it. When plunging into unfamiliar waters, it was nice to have a life jacket close by, and if she and Chat hit it off, it might be good to have someone she could go to for specialized advice. There was only so much internet research Marinette could do without running into walls of porny misinformation and innuendo that equally exasperated and embarrassed her. Aaliyah had made more than her fair share of 50 Shades of Grey jokes at Marinette's expense, and if she had to endure another one, she was going to come completely, Marinette, undone. It was amazing how a simple sound could trigger memories so easily. Whoever said that smell was the strongest sense associated with memory had clearly never heard their high school crush say their name after years of seeing him plastered half naked on billboards and bus stops across the world. As Marinette looked up into a pair of questioning, disbelieving green eyes, she felt herself snap back to her 14-year-old self, who would have simply swooned if Adrien Agreste had looked at her and spoken to her like he just had. And it was undoubtedly Adrien, blonde hair, boyish good looks, all 6 foot, 185 pounds of him. She didn't stalk him or anything, it was just that she worked in fashion. His measurements crossed her desk at least once a month. He was cloaked in a cream-colored, wool-lined peacoat, a blue scarf tucked around his neck, and cheeks flushed from the chilly January air outside the toasty cafe. In short, he looked as gorgeous as he did the last time she saw him, boarding a plane to Tokyo with tears in his eyes. "It's, Adrien," he said with a small wave that transformed into a nervous hand passing through his hair. She must have been staring, he must have thought she didn't remember him or something. "Adrien, I know," Marinette said after a moment, a little louder than she intended. I mean, know it's you. Hi. It's good to see you." "Good to see you too," Adrien chuckled as Marinette stood up to greet him a little too quickly as her feet tangled up in the handles of her bag. She fell forward a little, flailing out as Adrien suddenly reached forward to catch her by the arms. She lightly smacked into his chest, nose brushing off the rough wool of his scarf as he slowly guided her back to her feet. "Thanks," Marinette stammered, feeling her dignity take a hit she hadn't taken since she was in high school. "So much for making a good second impression." "Mind the step," Adrien said, holding Marinette at arm's length as he looked her over. "Wow, you look good." At this point, 14-year-old Marinette would have been down for the count, but 25-year-old Marinette had enough worldly poise to stay on her feet if her bag didn't have other ideas. "You too," Marinette said, stating the obvious as she brushed off her black blouse and tucked a strand of hair behind her ears. "I'm not surprised or anything," Adrian said quickly, pulling his hands back as he realized they were still lingering on Marinette's back. "I mean, you always had that flair for fashion thing going on." "Oh please, I thought I just wore the same thing every day," Marinette chuckled, lightly tapping Adrian's shoulder. She might not have been head over heels in love with him anymore, but he was still a part of her oldest friend group who she unfortunately fell out of touch with. "I didn't know you were still in Paris. I thought you were going back to Tokyo." "Oh, yeah," Adrian said, scratching the back of his head. "I was going to, but I thought I'd stick around a little here just to, settle things at home." "Oh, right," Marinette said, pulling back a little as she remembered the headlines that ran almost 6 months ago. She might never have been fond of Gabriel Agreste when she knew him, but his absence was definitely felt in her circle. "Sorry about your father." "Thanks," Adrian said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Been a couple of months, but I don't really feel like getting back on the road yet." "I wouldn't either," Marinette said, reaching out to pat him on the shoulder before thinking better of it and segueing a little awkwardly to a scratch on the neck. Unlike revenge, condolence was a dish no one enjoyed cold. "So you're going to be local for a while?" "Yep," Adrian said, apparently glad the topic had shifted to cheerier topics. "Glad to be back, not as glad as Nino, but there's really no place like home, huh?" "That's for sure," Marinette sighed, fondly remembering touching down on French soil after spending a miserable semester abroad in New York. "I may have to steal Nino and his camera while he's back. That spread he did with you in Brisbane was pretty impressive, and I'd like to have him shoot some of my stuff." "I'll be sure to pass the compliment and the job offer along," Adrian chuckled. "Things are going good for you, I hear." "Well enough, I guess," Marinette shrugged, lapsing back into conversation as though they didn't effectively miss out on the last 7 years of each other's lives. "We're finally starting to get picked up in some larger retailers, so our hard work is starting to pay off somewhat, though I don't think I need to preach about the virtues of hard work to a model." "Thank you," Adrian sighed, lips pouting ever so slightly in a way that used to she insisted silently make Marinette's toes curl ever so slightly. "You would not believe how many people think we're the ones with the easy job." She didn't know why he went into modeling when he had apparently struggled with it as a kid, but she supposed if she had a face and body like his and people were offering to pay her thousands of dollars to wear clothes, she would have jumped at the opportunity, until she realized she probably couldn't eat bread for the rest of her career. That was something of a deal breaker and part of the reason Marinette sewed rather than posed. "Your blog's been getting some buzz," Adrian pointed out as customers steered around the pair of them standing in the middle of the aisle. "You follow it?" Marinette said, eyebrows raising. "I thought it was just my mom and Aaliyah." "Your mom, Aaliyah, and about a quarter of the French-speaking blogosphere," Adrian insisted. "I'm surprised Marie Claire hasn't offered you a column yet." "It's just a part-time thing," Marinette said, fiddling with the hem of her blouse absently. "Something to do when I can't stand the sight of my designs anymore." "You're probably the only one who can't stand looking at your clothes in that case," Adrian said. "I've been dying to pull off your clothes for a while now." There was a small beat as they both flushed crimson for completely different reasons. "Sorry, that came out wrong, didn't it?" Adrian chuckled, tilting his head back and sighing as Marinette let out a small laugh in spite of herself. To think there had been a time where she had been intimidated by this guy. "I know what you meant," Marinette assured him. "Though I don't do much menswear and I don't think you have the hips for some of my skirts." They shared a small laugh that seemed to dissolve some of the tension between them. Adrian was probably the last person she expected to see in Paris, much less in an off-the-beaten-path cafe away from the city's heart. Like everyone else from high school, they had promised to keep in touch, but as time went on and they both became increasingly involved in their own careers, the Facebook messages and Skype chats became fewer and farther between. The last time she set eyes on him in person, he was about an inch shorter and 5 years younger, but even half a decade did nothing to diminish his boyish good looks. His shoots were always so distinct because even if he was doing his best to pull off the broody male model pout, his eyes always seemed to glitter back up at her like "we should get together sometime," Marinette said, mentally slapping herself before she started daydreaming again. "The four of us, I know Aaliyah would be happy to see you two again." "Yeah, I've been meaning to get back in touch with her," Adrian said a little sheepishly, glancing around the cafe as he took out his phone. I'd offer to get you a coffee, but I'm actually supposed to be meeting someone here pretty soon. Of course Adrian Agreste had someone to see. Marinette imagined that if she was an underwear model she would be beating dates off with a stick instead of meeting potential weirdos she met online. Well, whoever it is, you shouldn't keep them waiting, Marinette said, picking up her phone as well and sifting around for Aaliyah's number. My number didn't change, Adrian said, glancing back at Marinette for a moment as she fiddled with her contacts. I kept it when I went abroad so I could have a line when I came. Marinette glanced up and caught Adrian looking at her with a strange, bemused look in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he was suddenly angry at her until she realized Adrian's eyes were fixed on her ears. Something wrong? She asked as Adrian slowly tugged his scarf loose almost absent-mindedly, his eyes still fixated on her earrings. Those earrings, he said, leaning back as Marinette touched the red and black polka-dotted studs in her ears. Sorry, those wouldn't happen to be Ladybug earrings, would they? Oh, yeah, Marinette said, fidgeting with her earrings a little self-consciously. Always had a thing for ladybugs, so when I started doing my first line I thought I would play around with the pattern a little. Marinette trailed off as Adrian's coat fell open, revealing a pressed blue shirt tucked into a pair of khakis. It was a good look for him, classic and polished without being completely preppy. She would have given him full marks for it were it not for the fact he seemed to have a noticeable black pin attached to his collar shaped like a small, black cat. At that point she realized two things at the exact same time. One, black ornaments did not go with that shade of blue Adrian was wearing. It was kind of a bad look and she mentally filed that away for future reference. Two, she had apparently been in closer contact with Adrian than she realized. Ladybug, Adrian stammered. Me, Marinette squeaked as it felt like her face was 2 degrees away from catching fire. So that W would make you ch. She almost couldn't bring herself to say it because if she did say it, she would have to admit that she and Adrian, secret love of her adolescent life, had unwittingly met on the snobbiest Parisian kink site in existence. If she admitted that Adrian was in fact chat noir, she would also have to admit that Adrian now knew that his klutzy fashionista friend from high school had daydreamed about some fairly creative uses of thin silk strips. If Adrian was chat noir, then they both knew, within minutes of meeting one another again, that they had much more in common now than they did when they were friends in school. Guess I have time for that coffee after all, huh? Adrian chuckled, fidgeting with his pin as Marinette tried to make her mouth do the wordy thing that it used to be able to do. Despite having chugged 2 iced coffees in an hour, Marinette's throat and lips felt drier than ever. The quiet bustle of the cafe seemed to die as she slowly glanced between the pin and Adrian's chat's bewildered expression. Most people rekindled friendships with people from high school over Facebook or Twitter. Most people met for coffee, shared pictures of their bratty children, and sent old friends Christmas letters once a year. Marinette was clearly not most people, as she had somehow accidentally hooked up with her old high school crush on a bondage dating website and somehow hadn't even known it until he was standing in front of her. Chapter end notes. This certainly is a thing that is being done by me. So torn between writing sin and writing fluff for this fandom, I decided to do both. Here be the sin. Fluff's over on the Book of Revelations, where there's at least 80% more crying cat boys and no dorks having dorky costumed sex. Which is either a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. So as this is the first foray into this fandom, feedback and criticism is highly appreciated, especially at this early stage. I am going to finish this story and I'd like it to be as good as it can be, so if I need to work on some aspects, please don't hesitate to let me know. Couple notes. I know this is a no superhero where everything is the same except there's no Miraculouses, but Chat Noir and Ladybug still make an appearance, you'll see. You'll all see. Also yes, every single chapter is going to be a cat pun. Because why not?